Welcome, everyone, to Gotham City Bulletin. As always, I am Subject. I have Robert and Torgo with us. We are here with yet another review. Another one. Torgo, what are we talking about tonight? Torgo? Robert, can you hear me? I don't know why my Discord didn't unmute, but Torgo, what are we talking about?
We're talking about the 1988
Surprise,
classic.
motherfucker.
We're talking about the 1988 classic, The Killing Joke, written by Alan Moore and with art by Brian Boland.
No, this was written by Tim Burton, you fraud.
Well, he's got a quote on the cover, which
which means he wrote it.
Based on other information, I don't know how much I believe that quote, but
I believe he looked at the pictures. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. We are talking about the 1988 The Killing Joke. This is the copy I have. I don't know what you guys have, but I don't have anything fancy. It's just a hardcover.
If it comes up, yeah. I think it's the same hardcover. Oh, that is not showing up.
That is not showing. He's blending.
Yeah, I don't have that version. I do have the original from '88 and the Absolute edition, which has both versions and the script and some great art.
That looks really nice.
As far as Absolute editions go, this wasn't the most expensive because it's a really short comic. So they really had to fill it out to justify it.
Yeah.
So it was
but that's gettable. Cool that you get the original though, because I don't think they reprint that very often. I think most reprints are the recolor. Which I will say before we get too far into the actual review, Austin showed me some panels from that because I'd only ever seen this version. I think this is the better version. The new colors I think are a lot better for this kind of story. What do you guys fall on that if you've seen the recolor versus the original?
Well, I've only read the recolored version because that's what's most widely available, but I'd like to read the original version because from what I've seen, I like how a lot of the colors in that pop, but I also like the more kind of gritty look of this version, so I think either works for me.
Matt Zelank says, "Oh man, I thought you were reviewing My Little Pony tonight." Wrong channel, buddy.
No, that's next week.
Yeah. Robert, just out of curiosity, does yours also have the Tim Burton quote, or did they only do it on these special editions?
That might just be in the special edition. If it's in the Absolute edition, I just didn't see it. It could be in here somewhere. There's an introduction by Tim Sale, and afterward by Brian Boland. Like that quote could be somewhere in here, but it's not on the cover.
Interesting.
What's funny is the '88 version is the original coloring is what I grew up with reading because that's my dad's copy. So that was the version I always read. Then I got the Absolute edition to be able to compare and contrast. There are definitely things I like about the coloring in the original. This isn't really a great example, but it's just like all Joker colors. It's just a lot of orange and blue and green. It's very manic. It's very crazy. We'll talk about it when we get there, but it's just very bright, garish colors. And I think I'm with you guys. I prefer the recoloring overall just because it's very gray, it's very gritty. It leans a lot more into that noir, old filmic tone than the original. But I like personally being able to have both versions.
But I mean, having both versions is the ideal. I wouldn't mind having that Absolute edition, but I bet they're stupid expensive at this point.
I don't know how gettable.
I have to see how much it's going for on Amazon. Pick that up.
Yeah, so I mean, the main thing that I would say, and I've only seen a few panels out of context of the original coloring, because I've had this for a long time, is this looks more like how I would imagine a Batman story would look.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, I think even though this is obviously a Joker story as it's advertised, it's still enough of a Batman story that I want it to look like that. And of course, this is closer to how Brian Bolland envisioned the book. I'm not sure what happened with that original coloring, but
I think he just wasn't. He was like busy with something. He just wasn't able to do it, or I'm not sure what the full story was.
Yeah, well, and artists didn't always have a lot of say on that stuff back in the 80s. It was just like, here's the art, here you go. And then decades later, it's a critically acclaimed huge story. So now he obviously has the power to say, okay, well, this is how I would have colored it.
Right.
Like, this is how I envisioned it when I drew it.
So I looked it up while you're talking about that. It's $32 on Amazon. That's not bad.
Wow. That means a lot of people didn't buy it.
Yeah, I wonder.
Have to grab that at some point.
I feel like the story in some circles, especially more modern comic readers, that's a generalization just based on kind of some complaints I've seen. I feel like this has kind of been reevaluated, and we'll get to it later. But I feel like a lot of that reevaluation comes down to what he does with Barbara.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So when did you guys kind of first get into this book? Because like Torgo, I know you come into Batman later with like the Lego games and.
Yeah, I'm a young guy. I think at some point when I was trying to get more into the comics and just like more of Batman in general, besides just the movies, when I was like 13 probably, I discovered this book. And it wasn't the first Batman comic I read, but it was one of the first. And I was just like completely blown away and just shocked and honestly pretty disturbed. Like this book was actually pretty effective. Reading it at a somewhat young age, like realizing just how disturbing the Joker is in this story compared to how he is in the movies. And I had seen The Dark Knight at that point, and even then, this affected me more. I think more with we'll talk about the Barbara stuff later, but that for whatever reason was like, oh my god, I can't believe they went there. And, like that really left an impression on me. So yeah, I kind of instantly loved it. As time went on, I discovered other stories, and like I kind of there was some time where I hadn't read it for a while, and I was kind of just in my memory like, oh yeah, it's The Killing Joke. Like it's a classic story, but it's like it's not one of my favorites. But honestly, with this most recent read, I kind of rediscovered why I love this book so much. So
I had that too. Not to give away my feelings too early, but I've always been kind of on this book. Like I thought it was fine. But reading it, as when you get older, I think gives you a new appreciation for just what Moore is doing with both the Joker and Batman, while also keeping it ambiguous enough that you can discard this as an origin story. It's not the definitive origin. It's like it might have happened. We don't know, which is very classic Joker. I'd also argue, even to this day, this is one of the most vicious Jokers.
Yes.
Like, he just really enjoys hurting people. And he's fun, but he's also funny. Maybe it's just my sense of humor, but the flashlight joke at the end is really funny.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about that joke.
Yeah, we'll get there. So how do you guys feel about the art? Because the thing I know that took away most from this read through, besides just how vicious this Joker is just how good this artwork is.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, go on.
However, I'm not overly a fan of this bat suit, mostly the logo. I think the logo is too small. Yeah.
That's an interesting recoloring choice. Okay, well, before I put a pin in that, I love the art. I think Brian Bolland, I always call it Bolland, it might be Bolland. I apologize, I don't know the correct pronunciation. I think his Joker is my definitive Joker as far as the comics go. One of the earliest visuals I ever got of the Joker from the comics was a collection I had from growing up of the greatest Joker stories ever told, which has been reissued a bunch of times and has a bunch of different color covers. but this is the cover I saw on it of him with the laughing fish, a little homage there. That's like just my definitive comic book Joker. I don't think he looks better than that. Yeah, I think the art's gorgeous. It's very grounded. It's very gritty. It has a very similar 9-panel layout to like what he did on Watchmen. This isn't a very stylized book. It's treated very seriously. Let me see if I can find a good example of the bat suit, because the reason why the logo looks small is in the original coloring there is a circle around it, like the classic yellow Batman symbol. And then in the recoloring, I guess he just wanted just the black and gray look. So as a result, it's a smaller logo.
Well, while you're doing that, to compound your point, is this not one of the greatest just like Joker panels of all time? With the ha-ha-has behind him?
Yeah. It's so iconic.
That is the slipcover to this. And
yeah,
it's just that. Looks great.
I might have to get that.
Yeah, so there's a good example of that. So in the original coloring,
I still don't
it's
like
just the
that.
classic yellow.
I don't like that suit symbol either. It looks weird.
I prefer it just because of the yellow emblem. I'm fine
it is
with the symbol.
It is better, but it still looks weird. Like there's too many like lines down at the bottom or something. Not lines, but points.
Like any comic, I mean, it just varies from issue to issue, or from panel to panel. Like this is the recolored version, but you can see that's just the look. So he just dropped the yellow part.
Yeah,
but that's that one is smaller.
That one definitely looks better, but I'm still not a fan of like, I don't know. I think it's the drop down points like here. We're not going to spend too long on this, I promise, but like right here, I think are too long. I like it more like a flat line there and then down.
Yeah, that's fair.
But that is interesting that they removed a whole color from the bat suit. That is the one thing I will give this recolor or the original color. So we start with a very wordless. Let's see. Zidania says, "I wonder why this was a Batman book as opposed to a small run DC book. There's about as much Batman in this as there was in David Ayer's Suicide Squad movie." I don't agree with that.
I don't personally agree with that. I consider this more of a dual protagonist story, and this is published as a one-shot. I mean, Alan Moore himself describes the Joker as the main character, but maybe Joker the Killing Joke just doesn't sound good as a title, so it's Batman the Killing Joke. But
I mean, I would definitely say that Joker is the main character of this book. Batman's still an important piece in it, and I would almost call him a dual protagonist. And like,
I don't think this story works without him.
No, yeah, because we'll get into it later, but like he's a very important piece for how his worldview opposes to the Joker's.
Yeah, and I mean we've done it to death now, but like this is the Batman and Joker complete each other story.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'd say there's probably as much Batman in this as there is in '89, and maybe that was the big influence Burton took from this.
Well, but I thought about that because you said this comes out in '88. That movie would have already had to have been in like what pre-production?
It was at least in pre-production. I mean, they didn't generally take as long on movies back then as they do now, depending on the movie. That script was obviously been written and rewritten for years.
Yeah,
I think visually
that movie was in production a long time.
However much this literally influenced the movie, it's definitely what I think of as the closest approximation to the movie, just visually, just with the trench coats and the fedoras and just Batman's silhouette, how his cowl looks, how the Joker looks and his outfits. Like, this is the back of the original. It's like, I can't look at this and not think of '89.
Is that the original like graphic novel?
Yes, it was just published as a one shot.
Cool.
But like, do you guys agree? Like, I can't look at that and not think of '89. Just like
it's very
as far as the iconography goes.
Yeah, I can see that. No, yeah, I mean, and it's not about screen time. It's just how much they impact the story, and the story doesn't have a conclusion or a beginning without Batman.
No.
But anyway, so we start with really 2 pages of just silent no dialogue, atmosphere, and like we get to look at some of Boland's rendition of villains. I like their Two-Face.
It's very cinematic.
Yeah, yes. It's very, which again makes me ask, why couldn't we just adapt this?
Oh my god, that movie. We'll talk about that movie another time.
Yeah. Well, I guess I say villains, but we really only get to look at Two-Face.
Yeah, and Penguin has a cameo later.
Yeah. Well, I'm just talking about here, and then we finally get dialogue.
The bar in the middle.
Yeah, and then we finally get dialogue 4 pages in, and Batman has his famous, perhaps you'll kill me, perhaps I'll kill you. I don't buy that Batman would admit to have considered killing the Joker, not to Joker. I don't know about you.
Well, I think he's at the point where he's like, hey, like, we've gone on for years and years, like, something needs to happen. And I think he's just saying that as a way to try to speak to Joker, to try to convince him of it.
Zidania says, yeah, I'd like to hear you all talk more about how this book plays into the entire Batman can't kill Joker because Joker's the flip side of his vigilante coin. And this movie would scare the public, just the animated film was shocking. The animated film was pretty tame. But yeah, we will definitely talk about the vigilante coin when we get to it, because that's the big crux of the ending.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to do a big compare and contrast game with the movie. We might do a commentary on that at some point, so we'll talk more about the movie there. But
we can save the comparing for the commentary, yeah.
But if I'm just going to point out one little bit I love that's not in the movie, because they couldn't animate it, I guess, is when you're entering Arkham Asylum and you see the receptionist with that little sign on her desk that says, "You don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps." And that's what the whole comic's about, is like, you have this asylum's sole intention is to contain and help crazy people, and you have to be crazy to work at the asylum. You have to be insane to live in Gotham. I love it.
Yeah, no, it's great. So Batman talks at the Joker for a few panels, and then we get the reveal that it's not really the Joker, it's just some guy. Gordon comes in, and honestly, that's a very classic Batman, like, oh, the villain's already escaped, like Batman's 3 steps behind him. And then we get, like Robert was talking about, some of the best Joker art. I love this look. I would agree with you that this is kind of a definitive Batman comic look, because this feels like what animated series is like taking from for their Joker in many ways.
Yeah, I can see that. It's definitely looking at a couple of different things.
Well, definitely in Master of the Phantasm, he's got that hat.
Yes,
which Joker wears a few times in this. So
yeah, and that's the best Batman movie. So Joker is buying this this amusement park that's basically run down. Well, buying, as we'll get to. And then we get into our first flashback. So before we get into that, do you think this amusement park has any significance in the overall story, or is it just because, like, this is where the freaks lived? Because you see in one of the panels the fat lady poster.
Yeah. It is kind of weird that the freaks like come with the amusement park. Like, they don't have this,
and it's supposed to have been like abandoned for years.
Yeah, it's like Joker would have bought that whole land and the people that are there. Like, it's a little strange. But I think, I don't know if there's any tie-in thematically to that setting other than just to add to the whole like surreal vibe of the story. Like, there's, especially later with Gordon, when we get to like Gordon going through that fun house, there's a strong like surrealness to the story that I think I could have seen Burton also looking at in some way.
Or is it because he's the clown, so we gave him a circus?
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Well, and if you want to get meta with it, it's like, we used to entertain ourselves with freak shows and stuff like at their expense, you know, and that's what we're there. That's what we're paying for, and that's what we're here for a Batman story. Generally speaking, we don't want to see these villains rehabilitated or made normal or whatever. We're there for the freak show. So there are a lot of ways you could look at that.
Well, and I mean, Alan Moore is famously disenfranchised with superhero media.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think that leaks through a little bit here.
This story.
I mean, I might piss people off with this, but Alan Moore can shut the fuck up. Like, I'm tired of hearing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, no argument there.
So, Robert, let me ask you, since you've got the original book, I do want to do some comparisons. How are the flashbacks handled in that original coloring?
That, I think, is the big improvement with the recoloring. Because in the original, they're very yellow. And kind of, they blend too much with the main story. Like I said, it's a lot of orange, a lot of green. I'm trying to find a good page that I can show on camera.
Take your time, and I'm going to read this. Stuff. I'm going to read this chat thing. Zidanius, I never noticed it before, but the flashback art really paints it as Depression era America. Men wore suits and ties and made $3 per week. Yeah, I mean, I think the smart thing is that this book is timeless. It never gives a date, but it acknowledges, like, you know, the golden age of Batman, which we'll get to with the Gordon stuff. So this could have been, you know, like when the first Batman comic came out in what, like 39? 39.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is a good example of the original art, and it just doesn't work because it's very yellow, and you completely lose the red motif. Like, I love how in the recoloring everything's black and white except for the color red. Like the Red Hood helmet really pops, and like the lobster's red. And here everything just kind of blends together. You completely lose that motif. So I feel like for the flashbacks alone, the recoloring was worth it because they're like this. They're just very yellow. Upgrade. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can see why that upset him.
Just for comparison for the camera, that's the second flashback, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now let's
talk to the gang.
Just for the comparison, like we were talking about, it's all black and white, but then you got like the shrimp and the helmet. And it's we talked about this in our last illustrator. There's something about like when you take the color away from everything except red, and like you just put red, it looks so good.
Yeah, it just makes it pop.
And if we're gonna briefly talk about canon and stuff, you know, of course, there's the scene in the Batcave with Alfred, and you get that big view on the Bat computer of all these pictures of Joker, which of course reference a couple artists. One looks very Neil Adams, one looks very Dick Spraying, like all these images of the Joker. And there's one really perplexing photograph that makes the whole canon of this weird. So remember, this comic comes out in '88. This is well after Crisis. We've rebooted DC Comics. This is our new continuity. This was not published with the intent to be quote-unquote canon. This was just a one-off story, very similar to what Dark Knight Returns was. Like, if the Elseworlds label existed at this point, that would probably be on here, but it didn't yet. So like Dark Knight Returns is just published as one thing. And in that Batcave, there's a photograph of like the golden early Silver Age Bat family, like the original Batwoman and Batgirl and Batmite, characters that don't exist post-Crisis. And of course, there's a little Bob Kane signature, you know, a little homage there. So it's telling you, like, this is more of a follow-up to like some of the Golden Age stuff, or like Alan Moore's interpretation of the Golden Age stuff, but through his lens. And then, of course, this comic is critically acclaimed, and immediately is like, oh no, this was totally canon, because of course Barbara Gordon getting crippled, which we'll get to, becomes like canon, like for a long time, like that. So this comic is canon and isn't. Like, I don't know what to do with that photograph. I guess you're just supposed to ignore that part.
What almost makes this story stand out and as a little darker in a way, if this is like the follow-up to everything that happened in the Golden and Silver Age. It's just like, you know, very lighthearted and crazy, and then you get to this, and it's like super dark. It's like, whoa.
The Daniel says next review, you guys should take scans as opposed to holding comics up to a webcam. Did these talk, but I cannot see anything from the comic in a 3-view layout on my phone. I mean, I don't really have a way to just put a scan into OBS in real time. Like, I'd have to stop, save it, put it into OBS.
And on most comics, we're not gonna.
Yeah,
we won't have to review the art as much. This is a very specific case.
This is a very specific case because there are two very different art styles for this book, which I don't. Are there any other cases of that happening? Just like a complete recolor?
I feel like there must be.
There definitely are. I mean, what's really popular now is there's a lot of like black and white reprinting. I mean, we've been doing that forever, reprinting old comics in black and white. But there's technically a third version of Killing Joke. There's a top
which is the black and white
version. Yeah, which sounds interesting. But yeah, I'm sure there are. I can't name a specific
but
example.
Those don't replace. But, those don't replace the original.
Right.
Unless you have like that absolute edition, this is basically the only one you can get.
Yeah, it's a special edition, the George Lucas.
Also, real quick, Torgo, I don't know if you noticed this because you have the same version as I do. On just the base book, the final shot of Batman and Joker is engraved into the.
Oh yeah,
hardback.
It's in the book, the hardback. Yeah,
it's so cool.
It's really cool. Yeah.
But anyway, we get this flashback of a struggling comedian who. I don't think there's a real. Like, it's obvious it's the Joker, but if you're not thinking about it, like you're just kind of scrolling through the story, there's nothing obvious like, oh hey, look, it's the Joker.
Wasn't there a transition when he starts remembering his past and you see like his reflection in it, and you see
I'm sorry, well, you're right because it goes from he's looking at the poster of the fat lady and he's holding his hat. And then the very next page is him holding his hat the exact same way, but now he's talking to a pregnant woman. But see, that's what I'm saying. Is if you're just like reading it, not like stopping to analyze it, you're just like, oh, we're in a flashback now. But because I didn't even think about that until you pointed it out. That is such a cool like way to transition, but also kind of mean.
The book is full of those too. I think what I was thinking of is how it comes out of the flashback is you see his reflection somewhere in like the last panel of the flashback, and then you see the Joker's reflection in present day. In the next
so if you I don't have a choice, but if you look in this one, he's looking at it, he sees his reflection and he's talking to his wife, and he's holding out his hand, and then the next panel is the Joker doing the exact same thing with this, what is it, a poster? No, it's a slot machine clown.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice that when I was just kind of reading it, like, just kind of examining the art, but not, like, looking too deeply at it.
Once you start to notice them, they pop up everywhere, mostly between the flashbacks and the present-day stuff.
So let me ask you guys this. Do you think that this is how it happened? Or is this an unreliable narrator? Because I can't tell.
I think it could go either way, and I'm fine with that. Generally, I prefer the Joker's origin to be multiple choice. As he says in this book. Yeah, I usually prefer it to be ambiguous. I think for this story, it works. Like, I can sympathize with him, and I get where he's coming from with the one bad day thing, but obviously you have the dialogue later about how he doesn't really like to remember it, and we know that he's an unreliable narrator, so I think it really could play either way.
So the big thing that makes me question, at least this first flashback, we're not going to talk about the others yet, is about towards the end of it, her dialogue changes. I don't know if you guys had this, but at first she's just like a comforting wife, soon to be mother. And then it like changes and she's laughing at his bad jokes. It's like, you're nothing special, but you make me laugh and you're good in the sack. And I'm like, is that what was really said? Like, did this happen?
Maybe, who knows?
But no, and
that scene never struck me as weird, except for that really creepy smile she has in that panel.
No, it's so creepy.
Yeah, it is. I was always fine with like the scene and the dialogue. It never really struck me as weird.
I don't think it's bad dialogue, but I also don't know if that's what this woman would have said based on the previous conversation that they've been having. And
maybe not.
Because the panel that I'm talking about, where she says, you make me laugh and you're good in the sack, that's the same panel where she's smiling weird.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like
really creepy smile.
That all kind of adds up, and I'm like, I think at the beginning it's a sincere flashback, but by the end he's altered things in his head, or at least he's altered how he's presenting the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna take this literally, like, I'm fine with it. Like, as far as Joker origins go, this is probably my favorite, but the comic does give you that out of, well, this could all be fake or messed up or just in his head or whatever. But a couple smart things he does. One, we never get a name for this guy. So that's like the one area of ambiguity we at least keep, is that we literally don't know what his name was. And it's also, again, as kind of a follow-up homage to the Golden Age stuff. This is obvious. This is like the first time I think we bring back the whole Red Hood concept, because that's like a late Golden Age, early Silver Age story of, it's like the mystery of the Red Hood and the plot twist.
Now we can't stop doing it.
Yeah. Now we go back to it constantly. But it's like, the Red Hood Joker, and fell into chemicals and then became the Joker. But here it's like Alan Moore takes that concept. It's like, well, now let me flesh that out. Like, let's make him just a guy. And I really like his take on the Red Hood thing, where it's like, no, there is no Red Hood guy. It's just a costume that these criminals put on random people for their different heists and stuff. I think that's pretty clever. And this introduces the idea of like, well, what if Joker was a failed comedian? And that's a big thing we keep going back to. And
we made a whole movie about it.
Made a whole movie of that. And one concept that I've always loved from this comic, I don't know if this was Alan Moore's intention, it's something you could play with way more now, is the idea that, he was a failed comedian because he couldn't lean into his dark side. And when he starts telling dark, messed up jokes, that's when he's actually funny. Because sometimes it's hard to reconcile those things. It's like, well, how is he failed a comedian, but is also genuinely funny as the Joker? It's like, it's because when he's the Joker, he's lost all his inhibitions and he doesn't care what people think. He gets to be as dark and messed up as he wants. And that's when he's actually funny. And there's a lot you can play with that there. So I've always found that concept interesting.
We'll come back to that, because I think Alan Moore does some of that on purpose, especially when we get to the second flashback, which becomes absurd. But the last thing I want to mention about this first flashback is I really love how it transitions from the panel that Torgo and I were talking about the creepy smile and the kind of weird dialogue, directly to his reflection in one of those slot machine clowns that says "Laughing Clown." I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what the significance is there, but I'm sure there's something there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Then we get to the first of many horrifying panels in this book. And I have to ask Robert, how does this look in the original? Because the art is what makes this creepy.
I mean, it works in the original. Like, this is where I think the garish lighting. I mean, this always creeped me out. But yeah, there's a lot of purple, a lot of pink. Like on pages like this, I think the original coloring works, and yeah, it's still creepy. I think it still works.
From what I've seen, I'd have to read it myself, but
it works. But just from what I saw, it's missing a couple details that I think it makes this one look better.
Oh, there's a lot of that. There's a lot
of recolored versions, a lot more discrepancies. But from what I've seen of the original coloring, I think where a lot of it works is the carnival stuff.
Yes.
Not so much like the beginning with Batman, or just like whenever Batman's like in the city and it's like pouring rain and he's like investigating and stuff like that.
Zidania says, "Boy, the idea of the narrator being unreliable seems like a super cool idea. The stupid heart symbol that they introduced. How are we supposed to read the chat?
Yeah, you got to scroll down a little to see it.
But it's at the bottom of the chat.
He says, "I never read that version of this book."
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think there's enough evidence there. Yeah. But yeah, he's riding a pink elephant. Joker does something to him. I'm assuming it's like the Joker gas, right?
Just like he's got a little
it's a little thing he puts on his hand.
Yeah, I think it injects like venom or something into you.
The main thing that is missing from that original coloring, just from the brief glimpse that you showed, is the blood trickling down his mouth. I think that adds a lot to like how scary this is.
Yeah, it's a really freaky image.
Then we transition to the
Another example of that is the iconic part where he's laughing when he becomes the Joker. In the original coloring, it just looks like he's wet, but in this coloring, there's like blood coming out of his eyes and his lips.
That looks so cool.
Yeah, just that little detail change is immediately an improvement.
And then we transition to Batman in the Batcave. He's looking at a Joker card. I didn't stop to look at this picture of the Bat family, which is very Golden Age.
Yeah, it's designs. The Golden Age.
Isn't it weird that might exist in this universe?
Yeah.
It's so weird. I also I don't know if I buy this being the Golden Age Batman. Like, that just seems weird to me. It's whatever at the end of the day, but
yeah, I think like I said before, it makes it hit a little harder when you see like that transition from more lighthearted to much darker and screwed up. But I don't know.
And then we get the like panel of Jokers that Robert was talking about.
Yeah.
Well, if you go back to like Detective 27 or Batman #1, I mean, those are a little more serious, you know, just noir stuff. But I mean, if you're gonna consider those canon, I mean, that is a Batman who killed people. So
that's true.
You know, this could be a Batman who used to kill people, but then hasn't for years, and now he's
killed like vampires.
I might have to kill you, man. I don't want it. I don't want it. I killed a vampire. I don't want to do it again.
So one more movie comparison I want to make isn't with the Killing Joke movie. It's actually with Batman Returns. Because famously, Michael Keaton had them cut a lot of his dialogue down, and I don't think it works in that movie. Batman has next to no dialogue for over half of this book, and it doesn't feel like anything's missing. Like, he still feels like a character that is part of the story, and I think that's a problem that Returns has, is that movie doesn't feel interested in Batman.
Yeah, well, and a lot of that carnival freak show stuff is also what I'm talking about, where it just feels very Burton-y, like with Batman Returns stuff. Again, just visually speaking.
I love this line that Bruce has at the end of this Batcave scene, because like I said, a lot of this is dialogueless, but he says, how can two people hate so much without knowing each other? And I think that's a really interesting idea, because for all the stories that we have done about how the Batman and the Joker complete each other or are the same two sides of the same coin, we've never delved into the fact that neither one of them knows anything about the other. The closest we've done is just that the Joker doesn't care who's under the mask.
Right.
Yeah, Joker doesn't care who's under the mask because he's more obsessed with what Batman represents, I guess, and just like Batman's determination and like moral code and his commitment to not killing anyone. So yeah, it's really, they don't really know each other deeply as people. It's more just so a war of order and chaos. It's about what they represent.
Yeah, exactly. But I see somebody play with that idea of like, you two don't even really know each other. Actually know each other, and yet you hate each other.
And that's so unrealistic. How could you hate someone you don't know? We don't see any of that in humanity.
Oh my god.
We don't fight to save the ones we love. We fight to wait. What's that line?
You blew it.
I know.
We're not
what's interesting?
Who we hate. We're saving who we love.
Yeah, that's closer. What's interesting though about the relationship in this is, I don't know if I consider this like my definitive Batman Joker relationship, in that in this, at least in my reading of it, I don't get as much of Joker being all about the game. Like, I break out of Gotham, I fight you, we go. This feels more like a Joker who's like, dude, I just want you to see the world as I do. We're both crazy. We're both the same. Like, this doesn't feel like a Joker who enjoys getting beaten up by Batman, who gets off on that like other versions of Joker do. It feels more like a Joker that's like, dude, we're both crazy. Let's just have fun. Let's stop stop beating me up and just say screw the world.
I see what you're saying, but I kind of feel like he enjoys the game in trying to get Batman to see his side of things.
Sure.
Or maybe not so much at the end because he's like pleading with him. He's like, "Why aren't you laughing?" But I don't know. I always kind of saw I always kind of saw the Joker in most stories and trying to get Batman to see his side and trying to get him to go insane. So even when he's playing a game with him, so I've always kind of seen those two things as going hand in hand anyway. But I do see what you're saying.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like most versions of the Joker, at least in my opinion, in animated series or Dark Knight, I feel like Joker doesn't want Batman to change. Like, he likes things the way they are. This is Joker who wants Batman to change. He wants Gordon to change, is his whole motivation. So, I don't know, that's just the way I've always read it.
I think the best Batman Joker dynamic that I've seen is the Dark Knight, because it takes everything I love about that dynamic and boils it down to the necessities. It's not overly, stuffed with complications. It's just, no, this is who these two people are at their core. Zed says Batman and Joker are both chasing a fantasy. The more information they have the other, the more reality seeps in. And I agree with that. I think in their ways, even though Batman denies it, he's also chasing a fantasy. Because in many ways, and I'm sure we've tackled this, and we'll discover as we, read more Batman comics, and this never-ending quest to read all the Batman comics. His war on crime isn't winnable. The minute you introduce supervillains, it's over. Like, you're going to be doing this forever. But I think he's fine with that deep down.
Yeah. I think deep down inside he realizes that it's an unwinnable war, but he's going to keep doing it because
that's all he has.
That's what he thinks is right, and it's all he has. Yeah.
So we transition over. Oh, sorry.
Well, and if you're going to interpret the flashbacks we get for Joker in this as fact to the story, that's why I think his backstory complements Batman so well. I mean, we'll get in more detail in a bit, but that Batman is the way he is. He has a specific enemy. It's crime, whether it's literally Joe Chill or someone who was never caught or however that story plays out. Batman has a focus, and it is crime. That is his enemy. That's what he wages war on for the rest of his life. What happens to Joker is completely random and sucks, and that completely informs his worldview in this of the world is random, it sucks, there's no order, why do we pretend there is? And that's the point he wants to get across. Like, what's the point in being sane in this world? And of course, we'll get in more detail
we'll get
on that
there
later.
Because there's some stuff in the finale that makes me think that some version of these flashbacks had to have happened. But we'll get there. But let's rewind. We are at the Gordon's place. Barbara's kind of fretting over Jim, and she has to be Batgirl by this point, right?
Yes, and I think she's retired at this point in the comics.
Okay.
She is.
I'm not an expert on that. She's of course obviously been Batgirl for decades, but as far as this comic concerned, like, that doesn't matter. That's never brought up. Though when she sees Batman later, she does call him Bruce. So the implication is, okay, the honest Barbara has been Batgirl.
She probably had to have been Batgirl.
And then to Robert's point, on the bottom, you get the classic Detective Comics 27 cover as a newspaper. So clearly more is kind of like Morrison, where they consider all of Batman's history canon to some degree.
Yes.
At least for their respective story. Which is
of course,
cool.
The Joker isn't in that story, but it's a cool little recontextualization of, what if the guy on the Detective 27 cover was Joker? Like, that's fun. That's fun. And then we're consistent with it, because when we see Batman in flashback later, it is more of that Detective 27 look with the big ears, even though that's not how he looked in Joker's first appearance in the Golden Age. We are consistent with, like, Moore's take on the universe. I really like that attention to detail.
And then we get probably the second most famous shot from the Killing Joke Joker's on vacation for some reason.
I don't know why he's wearing that, but I love it.
I don't know either. Like, I don't know why Moore chose that, but it somehow works.
I guess it just goes well with the Polaroid camera. I don't know.
Exactly. Like, well, he needs a camera in this scene. That's of course what the famous cover is. So, who uses cameras like that? Tourists. Okay, let's dress him like a tourist because that's funny.
Is it because he's on vacation from the asylum?
Yeah, that's good read.
Sure. Yeah.
And he shoots Barbara. The question that I've always had with this scene, and I think why some people, and this is obviously the big controversial moment, is how fast is this supposed to be happening? Is this real time? Is there a delay? Because it kind of plays like there's a second delay.
I mean, I think it happens as fast as, she opens the door and he aims the gun and gets shot. But I think it's kind of played like cinematically where you kind of get Barbara's perspective where she like sees him and freezes, and then you have that moment of her freezing, and then she gets shot. So I don't know. I guess it's kind of just like a cinematic way of translating that.
Well, I was just wondering, do you guys buy that her Batgirl training wouldn't have kicked in and she could have easily disarmed him in the seconds before he shot off the gun?
Maybe, but I also see her. I don't think she would have expected the Joker to show up at her door, so I also see her freezing in fear because of that. And she was just talking about how she had nightmares of the Joker, So it's like, oh, we were just talking about him, and he's right here. It's like that's crazy.
That's crazy, man.
I see what you're saying.
Well, the way I have always read that scene is like in literal real time. It's like the second she opens the door, she's shot. But from her point of view, she is frozen in that moment for like what feels like forever. But like literally, I think she just opens the door and is shot. There's nothing she can do. This is also a very grounded take on the Batman world, where when Batman's fighting the Joker later, like he pulls his cowl over his face, he hits him on the head with a beam.
That's like, such a silly looking panel.
It is like this isn't a John Wick Batman, he's just a guy in this. So I don't think
that's true.
However you feel about how Barbara's used, I don't think it's any like disservice to her as like a fight or whatever. It's like, this could happen to anybody. And the tragic irony is Joker doesn't know this is Batgirl. She's just in the crossfire. She's just a means to an end for Gordon. That's who he cares about, which is of course really messed up and dark. But that's just another part of that irony. Is like Joker doesn't know this is Batgirl.
I've got mixed feelings Oracle was born. How Batgirl's or how Barbara's handled in this story, because she is just kind of a plot device.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, I mean for this story it kind of works, but like I don't know, but like Barbara Gordon's such a good character, and she's just used like this in the story, and it's
hey, don't argue with the wizard. He'll turn you into a toad. So I don't mind her getting shot just because it's a natural conclusion that at some point you're going to risk that. I don't know if I buy Joker stripping her down to nude, basically.
Weird. And that's really one of the things that kind of disturbed me as a kid, because I kind of assumed that he violated her. Well, I mean, he is violating her, but
Yeah, no, we know what you mean. Because I've always seen the Joker as somebody that's not really interested in other people. Like, I know we gave him a girlfriend sidekick later on, but I've never even been a big fan of that. And I get the idea is to mess with Gordon's head further. Yeah. But I don't know, man. I don't know if you needed to go quite that far.
Maybe you didn't. I mean, this is meant to be a very nasty, evil Joker, and that's just one way to explore that. I get the controversy to a degree because she's like the only notable female. Like, of course, the two most notable female characters of the story both die, right. I'm sorry, Jeannie dies and Barbara's crippled. So women aren't treated well in this comic. If this story was longer, there's definitely a lot more you could flesh out with that. It's also important to remember that this was just meant to be a one-off. Like Alan Moore has said, he wouldn't have done that if he knew they were going to make it canon. But what we got out of that was Oracle, who's an awesome character. So whether you want to call it necessary evil or whatever, I'm not saying you're wrong to criticize how the story uses women. I just can't not look at it in the broader picture of Batman stories. And we got Oracle out of it, who's a great, empowering, awesome character.
But
I think that's fine. And
I'm not debating the spine thing. I think that's perfectly fine. I just don't know if we needed shock upon shock. Like, just let Gordon know, his daughter's laying there bleeding out. She could be dead for all he knows. I don't know if you needed the extra layer of Joker stripping her down and taking photos.
Well, I mean, he strips him naked too. That's just part of the process to try to make him mad. I'm not necessarily defending that choice, but this is also, I mean, my preferred take on the Joker is usually a bit more asexual, or like he's just interested in Batman and nobody else. But this is a Joker who is interested in sex, especially if you consider the flashbacks canon. And then later, when Batman's like showing a wanted poster of the Joker to a bunch of people, he shows it to prostitutes. So the implication there is this is a Joker who sleeps around with prostitutes. Like,
yeah.
Like that's just the Joker we're dealing with in this world, in this story. But I get where you're coming from, where maybe the comic didn't need to go as far as it does. Like, I think that's fair.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And it's worth knowing that, like, the same year or the year prior, Joker beat Robin to death with crowbars. So just across the board, there's like a few years in comics where we're just making Joker extra evil. It starts from Dark Knight Returns through here.
He was screwing up all the sidekicks.
Yep.
All of them.
Yeah. All of them.
And I think what makes it worse is Barbara's conscious through, I would have to assume, most, if not all of it.
Yeah.
Well, the other big thing with the Barbara Gordon thing is when Alan Moore even brought up the idea of doing it, that there's the famous Len Wein quote where he was like, yeah, cripple the bitch. It's like, Jesus. Like,
God damn.
Like the crippling of a main character was made like that flippantly.
And then it transitions into a flashback. Again, Joker's in a specific pose, and then the flashback has him in the same pose. And he's talking to some mobsters, and that's when we get the first look at the helmet, which Robert showed us in the original coloring a little while ago. There's not a lot here in this flashback. It's just him being the chunk of it is him being persuaded by these gangsters and finding out that the Red Hood mob is kind of a charade. They just recruit random guys to wear this while the real masterminds pull it off.
We also find out that Joker used to work at the chemical plant, which I think is just adds to that irony of what his fate is. I don't remember if that's in the original story, the original Red Hood story, or not, but it does at least put in that chemist background where it's like, okay, if this guy's just a nobody, poor, failed comedian, like, how does he know how to invent like Joker toxin and stuff? So there is that little wrinkle in there, like, well, he worked at a chemical plant, so I don't know. He said he was like a lab assistant.
People who are worried about details like that, in my opinion, fundamentally misunderstand the fantastical element of comics.
Right. Like,
I don't care why Joker can make Joker gas.
You just can't.
There's this weird thing with the shrimp in this flashback. Like, why do we keep focusing on the shrimp?
Well, it's now not all the transitions are meant to be literal, and this is one of the most disturbing ones, where I think this is the one with the shrimp with its leg getting pulled off at the end, and then you turn the page and it's them poking at Barbara's legs to see if she is. So it's like, ugh, like it's just really messed up and dark. So not all the transitions are literal. Some are more just like
but I mean, this entire flashback is just like the shrimp in every other panel.
Character.
My favorite character in the book.
I think it's probably to accentuate or draw attention to the color red in that scene, which is obviously important because they're talking about the Red Hood. But I don't know. Maybe there's a deeper meaning to it, but I'm not sure.
And then we get to the hospital. Bruce has found out about Barbara. Found out what Joker did. Wakes her up, and she's terrified. I like this humanity. So I want to go back to this point I made a minute ago. I understand that she was scared of Joker as a child, but I'm to believe that this woman was Batgirl, face down probably the Joker, Two-Face, not Harley Quinn. She didn't exist at this point. All of those. Retires for a little bit, and then freezes again at the sight of him.
I guess it maybe depends on how long she's been retired. She's settled and hasn't had much of a chance to fight crime recently.
I mean, she's shot point blank. Like I said, my reading on it has just always been she opens the door and is shot.
Well, and I think that's my main issue is I can't tell how in real time that is, but I do also I wasn't taking into consideration as well that she said, this is more of a back to basics grounded, Batman that's maybe not like a kung fu master.
Yeah, I mean, he always was in the comics, but he also gets beat up a lot in the comics.
True. I really like this panel of her upset, like the way this coloring does it really enhances that emotion.
Well, and for the little bit of character we get with her, I mean, her main concern is just her father, know, and I don't mean that in a male character taking priority or a female character. It just shows that that's where her heart and where her love is. So I think that's a good level. I wish we got more with her, like in the comic, but I do think that's a good scene.
Yeah. We're gonna start to speed this up a little bit because we're an hour in and we're only halfway through this book.
There's a lot to talk about with this book.
There is. Mm-hmm. And then we get to Torgo's favorite scene where they strip Jim Gordon down naked.
Why is that my favorite scene?
You don't like that?
Well, there's a bunch of little people in it, so maybe it's Austin's favorite scene.
This is probably Austin's favorite scene. Where did these people come from? Like, did they just come with this abandoned circus?
I think that's what I was saying earlier. Like they just lived there.
My favorite thing about this, and this book is going to get a lot sillier from here on out, is the guy still on the pink elephant, and like Moore goes out of his way to show you that he's still on the pink elephant.
There's that big panel later where you see the Batmobile driving, and you see that guy still on the elephant in the background.
Robert, not to be a repeat, but how does this all look in the original coloring?
I think you shouldn't have put. Kind of
I was gonna say, works. Please better not put that book away.
I have it on. Well, I'm worried how much I can show though, because you got a naked Gornet being paraded around.
Oh,
true.
You don't see anything that bad, I don't think.
Yeah, this is where the garish coloring I think kind of works. Like this is where they're in the roller coaster, where again it's just a lot of green, a lot of orange. It's just him going crazy. Yeah, it's just him.
What page is that?
I think it works because it's garish.
Yeah, it's just all about the freak show element.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this works so much better. Where it's just like you can part of it is you can actually see what the fuck is happening.
Yeah, I think they both work. Well, like I said, I think from what I've seen of the original, I think most of it works in the carnival scenes, but I also like the recolor too.
To Torgo's point, though, on the one page where Gordon's first, being stripped naked and tortured, and Joker says you're going mad. That is very like Phantasm or Jack Nicholson Joker, the way he's sitting and looks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this is where we get probably my favorite Joker speech in the whole book. This whole comic is just like my favorite Joker dialogue ever, at least as far as comics go. Really and I love this speech how he has about like, oh, don't remember. Remembering's awful. Like memory is what our reason is based on. If you lose memory, then you're free. Sanity, madness is the emergency exit. Just trying to make his point.
There's no sanity clause.
His point of view is really interesting. Of like going insane being something you can choose. Where it's like no, just let go of reality. Reality sucks. Everything we are is based on memory. Like. Memory is what our reason is based on. And as we'll talk about in a second, with what we find out in the flashback happened to his wife and child, he says, there's no reason anymore. Like, that's the whole reason I'm doing this. Why I'm committing this crime. Like, that's the reason, and I don't have that reason anymore. I just love it.
No, it's very cool. It is a very good speech. And I like that it shows that, like, fundamentally, the Joker doesn't understand good people. Because he just assumes that everyone will have his reaction to stress.
Yeah, which you get in The Dark Knight. Like, that's very looking at this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that whole boat scene, as much as I think it slows down the movie, is thematically this. And this is so, and then that makes me wonder because you mentioned the transitions aren't as in your face. As I wonder if this is also like a clue that this is more Joker messing with us, narration wise, because I kind of see the transition here, where you go from like the door shutting as the clown face to the two people behind the bar and grill door. But this is the first flashback where I think the entire thing is unreliable narrator, because this is the most absurd flashback in the whole story, at least to me. But basically, two cops come in and they're looking for police. So let me ask you, because I also agree with you that I like that we never get a name, but I think this is also it's a little clunky here. They just go into a bar and don't ask for the person they're looking for by name. Make sure it's him.
They have a photo of him, I think.
Yeah, but I kind of see what John's saying. Like, why would they not just know his name?
Yeah, why wouldn't they call him his name? It's not like a negative. It's just, I think that's where
it's a little clunky.
The urge to not give him a name is rubbing up against the story that's being told in this flashback.
Or they could have just went up to him and said, "Sir, could we talk to you outside for a second?"
Instead that's what they. Well, that's what they say.
No, that is what
they call him sir.
They go in with the picture, and there's that whole thing. But they
when they
just
approach him.
Yeah, but I'm saying they could have just approached him from the beginning.
Well, it's the idea is supposed to be that they know I guess they heard from somebody. They know that he's at this bar, but it's a very crowded bar, so they're asking the bartender. They hold up the photo, like, can you point? And then they point him out. So that's like, oh, there he is. And then they say, hey, sir, can you talk to us outside for a minute?
So the other thing I want to ask you before we get to where I think it becomes absurd is, if you notice, there's no red in this flashback.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that's intentional, or they just couldn't find a place to fit it?
That could be either.
Yeah,
because this isn't the final flashback. There's still one more, but I find it interesting that this is the first one and only one without any red in it. Any thoughts there, Robert? Or...
No, I'm just ready to get to the thing that you want to talk about.
I didn't put much thought into the red. Like I said before, I think it's just, I'm not sure what the absence would signify. So
Robert's like, hurry the fuck up.
We're running out of time here.
So the cops come and tell him, your wife had an accident this morning. Apparently testing a baby bottle heater, there was an electric short, and she died. Okay. First of all, why was she testing a baby bottle heater? They don't have a baby yet.
That's the type of thing
they're going to have a baby. Out.
It's pretty close.
They're going to, but like, this is either the same day or the day after the other two flashbacks.
I think Cap would argue with you on that. There's stuff people like to prep months in advance.
Let me preface by saying I don't have kids. I don't want kids. I'm just spitballing. Yeah. Secondly, what are the chances?
Well, that's part of what drives them mad is it's completely random, and they even say it was a 1 in a million chance that would happen. I think that's on purpose. That's one of the things that like drives him insane, basically.
Maybe it is absurd. I've never tested a baby bottle heater, but going back to the 80s and prior, there were so many fires and people dying in stupid ways. There was so much shoddy equipment. And this is a really crappy part of Gotham. Like, this is a slum that they're in. So I don't know. It's nothing that's ever bothered me. Where it's like, yeah, that's the type of stuff that probably just happens.
No, that's
get electrocuted and burned to death all the time.
That's fair. I think the rest of the book is so grounded that and it doesn't become absurd at all. Flashbacks or no, until we get to the circus thing, and I think that's on purpose. Like I think this is the one that's supposed to tell you it didn't happen this way. This is just how he's chosen to remember it.
Well, maybe. I think for the context of the story, though, it's really important that something random happened to this loved one. Like, he taunts Batman later and says, like, you must have had a bad day too. What was it? And with Batman, his bad day led to him having a very specific crusade. Joker's bad day is like, what? Do I hate the world? Like, what do I take from that awful experience? It's like when a loved one dies in a... Like, if you wanted to do something more realistic and simple, like, you could have said, oh, it was a hit and run. Like, but even then, that would probably give him a specific target. So, like, that's probably a bad idea for this story, because that would give him someone specific to go after or blame. I love that he just hates the world and blames the world, and it's just all about random injustice. As
it's like the universe keeps kicking him while he's down.
It's just a freak accident. My favorite part of that flashback is just his reaction to it. It's always stuck out to me. It's like very real. Of the cops just say it to him. There's a beat, and he just says, "What?" Just imagining the shock in that moment, and just like, how do you process that? Like, it's really gut wrenching. That moment's always stood out to me.
Yeah. And I like that they convince him to go through with this anyway. That now that he has like no reason to do this.
Yeah, well, they'll probably kill him.
Before we move on, I just want to preface again, for I'm sure the people that will type angry comments. I am in no way saying that I am right. I do not have this life experience. I don't want it. I'm just saying it stuck out to me. The last thing I want to mention is because we brought up that this book doesn't really transition into this flashback, but it transitions out. And I think it's really interesting that Joker in the flashback is holding himself the exact same way Gordon is in the circus freak car, whatever.
Yeah, because he wants to make him feel the way he feels, or the way he felt. Is how you could read that.
Yeah. Then we get some more dialogue from Joker trying to drive him insane. Okay, so I do have a question. His whole thing is anybody would go the same way I did if they had one bad day. Bad day is shooting his daughter, and taking pictures of her. What does he hope to accomplish with like the circus freaks? Like, is it just because it's supposed to be weird and it's like supposed to mess with Gordon's sanity?
Yeah, I think it's supposed to just create a sense of surreality, and just basically that, just break his sanity.
Okay.
Yeah, he's in a weird place. He's literally stripped naked. It's just taken out of his comfort. So, I mean, if you want to talk about like how this comic could be controversial, like, I think it's fair for anyone to have an issue comic with this comic, which is how the circus freaks are portrayed. Like, I think that's a fair thing to take issue with. I think it works with the story. It's just very dated, and it's fascinating. I mean, you can go back to a movie like Freaks. I don't know if you guys have ever talked about that.
I have seen that
movie,
but that's like actually really humanizes them, and it's just kind of a fascinating part of our history where when freak shows and circuses started closing and going away, a lot of those people were out of work and couldn't get anything else. And like, it's just a very complicated, weird situation. It's just important to remember that like these were real people with lives and stuff, and I can understand this depiction of that stuff, like not working for everyone, like the fat lady and all that stuff. Like, so,
and I don't hear
if that bothers you, I think that's fair.
I've never heard anybody complain about that.
I haven't heard people talk about that, but I can see someone taking issue with it. It's weird. People talk more about the Barbara Gordon thing, of course, than something like that.
Well, and speaking of the Barbara Gordon, we get to the other big thing with this is when he's shown all these clearly naked pictures of Barbara.
Yeah, it's a bad day.
It's pretty bad.
Her facial expressions could, I think, easily be confused for something else. I'm just saying.
Yeah. You're not wrong.
Which I think lends to that credence of maybe he did more than the book lets on.
Yeah.
When I thought that's what the book was implying when I first read it, and that's part of why this book was so disturbing to me when I first read it.
I think there's enough evidence here to say that he did what Torgo thinks he did.
Well, we'll see. I'm not sure. I think it could go either way, but my first experience reading the book, I certainly did think that's what happened. And it was just shocking because it was like Joker never did anything like that in the movies.
Well, and the animated movie leans hard in.
Of course it does. You got to earn that R rating.
Yeah. But I don't know. I've always read it as he just takes pictures, but like you're not wrong. It was
and then
very
I don't want to
evil Joker.
I don't want to show this panel because I don't have a way to show just that panel and not the panel right above it. But the panel right under the creepy barber pictures has an amazing Joker pose. I like that his neck grew like 3 feet.
He's a cartoon character. He can stretch.
Yeah. And then we get more dialogueless Batman just showing Joker's poster.
Investigating.
Their Penguin is almost perfect, but that nose is absurd.
Yeah, that's how it used to look.
Is it?
Okay. It's authentic. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
A very pointy nose.
I've discovered that I really like the Penguin in concept, but I've never read a great Penguin story.
There aren't many.
Yeah, he doesn't have many. I love the Penguin though. I think you can do
Come
a great story.
What are you showing me? Come on.
What are you showing me?
Even Colin Farrell's Penguin, though, like they do give a prosthetic nose, but that feels more like a believable big nose than
like big. It's not like he looks like Pinocchio in this book.
Yeah, that's how he looked in the comics. Like that's how he looked in the cartoons, you know. So, but I get what you're saying. No, that's a bit exaggerated, maybe for this book.
So let me ask you this final question about Batman before we move into the third act, essentially. Is Batman kind of a shitty detective in this to you guys? He has to literally be invited to the circus to find it.
Yeah, that's the first place you'd probably...
Yeah. Maybe.
Like, you're telling me this man's...
Before that.
Right, but you're telling me this man spent all night looking for this place and can't find it until he's literally given a map.
Maybe in this universe, this is the very first time the Joker had to hide out in a circus.
It reminds me of that one panel of No Man's Land that I've seen out of context, where it's just like Batman with a microphone going around like, has anybody seen the Joker or whatever it says?
Well, the implication is at least like this isn't random. Like Penguin has worked with the Joker many times. That's why he sees the Penguin. I've always gotten the implication with the prostitutes that those are people Joker has visited before. So that's why.
I don't have enough information to say that. Batman in many stories has used like prostitutes and other street level people to keep as eyes on the street.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's possible that they just know they've been like they overhear things. They have certain information that
it's very big.
Yeah.
Well, but like everyone else he's showing that picture to is like someone who has specifically like been with the Joker before, so that's how we always.
But I don't have enough evidence to say that they've done that in this book.
Mm.
You're bringing something to the book.
But you guys are talking about your read on like what he does to Barbara earlier, so that's just my point. Is this a story that implies that the sexual Joker?
Yeah, that's true. I love how all this looks in this recolor. You get kind of a hazy looking sky.
Mm-hmm.
More Joker taunting. Like, hey, hello, anybody home? And then we get into our final flashback, which I think is going to be one of the last bits of meaty discussion. I don't know about you guys, but there's a backup story in this that I didn't read because it's not the Killing Joke.
Yeah, I've read it before, but I didn't read it this time around.
I don't even know what it is.
It's good. It's just another story drawn by Brian Boland, so they just throw it in as a little extra. I think it works. It's not connected at all to Killing Joke, but it's worth reading. I think it's a good little story.
So we get him putting on the helmet, and interestingly enough, I didn't think about this while I was just reading it. The first shot we get of him with the helmet on, the guy he's looking at looks like the Joker. Do you guys have that?
Interesting.
Which guy are we talking about?
The hat specifically. I think that's definitely deliberate, and he's got the big chin
right there.
Oh, that guy. Yeah, I can see that.
But he also has a mustache.
Yeah, but I mean that's you can't see that in the red.
So he sees a Romero Joker.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, the worst Joker.
No, that is not true. That is literally not true.
Now you're gonna get angry comments.
For the record, I am kidding. What the hell is that guy's name?
Jared Leto.
Leto is the worst Joker.
Might be.
What is that man's name? He's so bad I can't remember him.
And I should remember because I just finished Dune.
Oh, Paul's father.
His name is Leto.
Yeah. I was like, he's not in that movie.
The robbery goes bad because, surprise, the ex-employee doesn't know that they changed the security. This was not a very well thought out plan.
Nope.
Joker.
This is the one bit of like violence, like bloody violence you get in this part where the other guys get shot in the head, and it's not graphic or anything, but it's like kind of surprising.
Are you talking about just in the flashbacks?
Yeah, in the flashback when the security guards shoot the other guys.
I didn't understand for a second, so I was like, are you seriously going to sit here and tell me that this is the first graphic violence in The Killing Joke?
No.
We got a splash.
It's the first bloody violence, I think.
Well, Barbara getting shot's pretty graphic.
Barbara getting shot's pretty bloody. Did you read the story before we began?
Nobody gets shot in the brains before this. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, here's Batman, but it's hard to tell. Like they smartly don't give you a full on look until the Joker vision again because he's in the helmet, and Batman's ears almost look like horns, which I find interesting.
It's kind of like first appearance Batman.
Yeah,
but that's not what they look like in the shot before.
Well, when we see the clipping,
Torgo, pull out your books.
In this comic, they've always looked like devil horns to me, but they're a lot bigger in the flashback, which is deliberate because that's very like
because in the panel before they're like going this way.
They're going back, but
the Joker shot, they're like closing in on each other like pincers or horns.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a little bit more exaggerated from Joker's perspective, but I don't know, like it's still pretty long.
It's just comic book art. Like there's gonna be a little.
Well, no, I like that because it makes Batman kind of look like a demon to this scared, forced criminal.
Well, if you go back and look at the clipping that Gordon has, that's the homage to the Detective 27. Like he also has the big ears in that, so I like the consistency. But I get what you're saying. How in that specific panel they do look like very like devil horns, like very monstrous.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly that panel, isn't it? Or exactly that cover.
Yeah. This is why you have to follow along.
I'm gonna have to look at each panel for 20 minutes before I can go to the next one.
God damn it, Torgo. And then we get the famous, he's like burning, can't breathe. He takes off the helmet, and we get the famous shot. Robert, you know what I'm gonna ask, but we gotta see the old art style. I'm curious.
I think it works.
I've seen it. Yeah, I think it looks cool.
The chemical water is like a lot more green. They really play that up.
That works. I think.
Then like the recolorings are, but again, a tiny little change is here. It just looks like he's wet, but in the recoloring, like there's blood coming out of his eyes and his lips. Like he is messed up.
So one thing I will give that one over this is I like the purple gloves over the white gloves.
I don't, because I've always loved just the black and white Joker suit, which is like usually how he looks as the Red Hood. But I get what you're saying. But the purple gloves are a lot more Joker.
Let me ask you this real quick. Are they still purple in the shots before? I know this is very riveting, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know how consistent they are with that. You can't. No, they are purple. They're definitely purple. Like he has a purple tie and purple gloves, but the rest of the suit's black. And this is one of those things that feels either directly or indirectly an influence on 89. Just how that movie handles him falling in the vat of acid.
That's when he, clearly starts killing Joe.
It's it's done very differently. It's shot very differently, but it's just another example of him looking at himself and laughing maniacally, which isn't really how it plays in the Golden Age / Silver Age story. How they handle the flashback there, it's like he gets home after falling in the acid and he still has his Red Hood stuff on. Like he gets home, takes the helmet off, looks in the mirror, he's like, "Oh, I look like a clown now. I shall become the Joker." Like it's not like it turns him insane. He's just like, "Oh, I guess this is my gimmick now."
Well, that's because Jack That's because Jack Nicholson's Joker is just Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, but he still has that break though, where like he just starts laughing,
Yeah, like, because he's just playing Jack Nicholson. Like Jack Nicholson always has come off as a little crazy.
Yeah, I think Jack Nicholson.
I think Torgo
Jack Nicholson worked. I think he works as the Joker still.
But there's like definitely a shift where he's not initially happy to see his reflection. He cries for a second and then starts laughing, which feels very reminiscent of this.
And then we get Joker like doing a nature documentary style commentary.
The Average Man.
Yeah, which I thought was funny, but I don't really have anything to say about it. Like, it's just kind of a clever little like.
It's kind of funny.
How do you guys feel about this Oh, sorry.
Well, and you just get more of his point of view, where he's just like, yeah, after all this stuff that's happened to this guy, like any rational person would go crazy.
How do you guys feel?
Not to go crazy.
Wait till they get a load of me. Yeah. How do you guys feel about this Batmobile?
I love it.
Really?
It's very Silver Age, very old school. It's not my favorite.
I am not a fan.
I like how old school it looks. I don't think it would be my definitive Batmobile, but I like it.
None of my favorite Batmobiles have the big bat face on the front, but that's on a lot of Batmobiles from back in the day.
That's the big thing I don't like, is I just think that face kind of ruins it.
Yeah, that's just what we did a lot for decades. I don't think it's until like 89 an animated series where we kind of get away from that entirely.
Well, I did just buy the 3 Neil Adams trades that they have on Comixology.
Well, and that's one of my favorite Batmobiles, because that doesn't have the face, and that looks a lot like the Batman one. It's more of a muscle car, but it's blue. That's like the main difference.
So
but that Batmobile I like a lot.
I am excited to read that, because I assume that's like the post-crisis Batman.
No, that's like 70s. That's
no, wait, they're right. That's 70s. Yeah. Who the hell was 80s Batman?
Lots of people.
So he didn't really have a run like Superman or Wonder Woman.
No, Danny O'Neill was on Batman a lot, and in the 80s you get, or maybe 70s too, you get Englehart, Doug Mensch. Doug Mensch did a lot of Nightfall stuff. I don't know if he's credited for creating Bane, but who immediately takes over post-crisis, I couldn't say. It's a lot of different.
I'm not sure.
Like, I think Jim Starlin writes Death in the Family, and that's like pretty shortly after Crisis. But yeah, I couldn't immediately tell you like who the first Batman writer.
I think it might be Starlin.
Crisis. Maybe. Okay. And it's also important to know that Batman's one of the few comics that was relatively untouched after Crisis. Like there were canon changes for sure, but as far as I know, like for example, Jason Todd was Robin at the time, and post-Crisis they do change his origin, but it's still Jason Todd Robin. Like this current status quo was still kind of what it was pre-Crisis, is the point.
It's funny because Jason Todd's original origin was basically just cut and paste Dick Grayson again.
He's just Dick Grayson too. Do you know this, John? He used to be in a circus, and his family was killed. So Batman takes him in. Like that was Jason Todd's pre-Crisis origin.
I do know that, and Morrison does something with that.
Oh, okay.
So Morrison has this whole slight spoilers if you don't care.
I'm fine. It's fine.
Yeah, we're
more fine. Jason Todd, because Jason Todd is like a Joker like character for Dick Grayson's Batman. And Jason Todd in that book makes a big deal out of how Bruce just wanted him to be Dick Grayson again.
Yeah. Well, and the one, and I'm sure he plays it. I have read that stuff. I'm sure he plays with this. Jason Todd used to be a redhead, and then would dye his hair black.
He says that Bruce would make him dye his hair black, dress up in the Robin costume. He blames all this stuff on Bruce for turning him into Dick Grayson, or a copy of Dick Grayson. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think post-crisis he just has black hair. It's just not something we're talking about.
So then we get.
I haven't read any of the Morrison stuff yet.
I like the shot of Joker. Like, it looks like he just is shit posting on the internet.
Yeah.
You've come to the Asloom, Batman.
It's the Jonkler.
But I like how it comes back full circle to the opening monologue from Batman, but this time it's just narration, and they're fighting. And I like that this Joker uses gadgets. I don't feel like we see enough of that anymore.
Yeah, we used to a lot back in the day.
And then he rescues Gordon. So I don't know if you're still here, Zidanius, but this is the big thing. I want him brought in. I want him brought in by the book. I'll do my best. By the book. We have to show him. We have to show him that our way works. At the end of the day, this whole story is about proving that just because you had a bad day and crack doesn't mean anybody else is going to. At the end of the day, if any of this is true, then the Joker was just a weak person.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, when I think what's very telling about this story is Joker has an inherently wrong, like incorrect worldview. And what I think is he didn't even really have one bad day. He had a series of different things happen to him, and it all built up into one night. Like he
blames that one night.
No, but he already had like financial troubles. And worrying about the baby, and he was already bombing as a comedian. It's all those things, and he tries to do that to Gordon, who's a pretty stable person, all in one night. It doesn't work because Gordon's not as fragile and damaged as the Joker was back then.
As the Jonkler.
Leading to him turning mad. So, I mean, Joker's just, his ideas are wrong.
You're wrong, Joker. You're wrong.
I disagree with that Joker guy.
But I do like the romanticization of it being one bad day, because it's a better parallel with Bruce literally had one bad day.
Bruce had one bad day.
But I like on the flip side with what you said is it's a bunch of small days combined, and it encapsulates in that one bad day. Whereas Bruce had a really good life until that one bad day changed everything. Right. And you could make a comparison on how that kind of alters both of their paths and explains why they went the ways that they did. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a book that compares and contrasts the Batman and the Joker. Before that's every fucking story with them.
Every story. Yep. Yeah. And this is, I think, is still like the gold standard of that, or one of the best examples of that.
Arkham City is up there for me.
Arkham City's good too, yeah. We definitely wouldn't have that story if it weren't for this.
Dark Knight's pretty high. That's a pretty definitive.
Well, I mean, Dark Knight is, in my opinion, like I said, that is the Batman and Joker dynamic distilled down to its purest. Like, this is why you love these characters, and that's what works about that movie. And that's why I think, and we'll get into this when we eventually do the commentary, but I think that's why, for me personally, that movie loses a lot of steam once Joker is no longer in the movie, even though I love that movie. But anyway, this book, this like 100-page book that we spent an hour and a half on.
Well, and it's not 100 pages.
I was exaggerating because I don't know about yours, but mine has no page count.
Yeah, well, mine does, and I'm near. I think it's like 50. It's about 50 total.
Oh, so this 50-page book that we spent an hour and a half talking about.
Well, and I love later Batman will have one of my favorite retorts that we've kind of been talking about, where he says maybe it wasn't the rest of the world, maybe it was just you that broke. Like you don't reflect me or anyone else. And what I love about, or what I find interesting about just the whole debate of why Batman should kill or why Batman shouldn't kill, that kind of bugs me when a lot of people are so insistent on who are on the side that, well, Batman should kill the Joker. It's like maybe Batman doesn't want to kill. And I feel like that side never brings that, and that's a more interesting character to me. Of like,
well, it's because
maybe he doesn't want to kill. That's what this whole story is about. It's like this is probably going to end with one of us killing each other, and I don't want that to happen.
Well, and we'll get there. We'll get there because I think that's a little muddled with the ending, but we'll get to that. But and with all due respect to anybody that believes that, or with all due insult, however you choose to, and that's not, process it. In my opinion, anyone who says that Batman should kill, that is a very shallow representation. Look at Batman. You're not thinking about it. If you want that, go read The Punisher. Batman isn't for you.
Yeah.
Or Indiana Jones, or James Bond, or a million other characters who kill people. That doesn't make him more interesting or unique.
Just because you cannot wrap your minds around the escapism fantasy of Batman or like Superman, doesn't mean that those characters need to be brought down to your level. It means that you need to rise to their level.
Yeah. No, and that's true with a lot of DC heroes. They're more like aspirational figures than someone like Marvel.
And that is my soapbox for the day. Anyway.
One thing I just want to say about that is most people I've heard say that Batman should kill aren't Batman fans. So that's just the one thing I'll say.
Yeah, so it's like, why do you care?
I'm not trying to be elitist about it. Like, they just legitimately don't read Batman.
Just wait till we make the video on should Batman kill. Well, that'll get some. Yeah. Anyway, so Joker has this whole big spiel, and then he's like, it's all a joke. Everything anybody ever valued or struggled for, it's all a monstrous, demented gag. Why can't you see the funny side? Why aren't you laughing? And it's the only time in this book that I can think of when Joker, not in a flashback, but in this, main storyline, isn't smiling. And Batman bursts through the mirror in a badass wide panel. And it's like, because I've heard it before and it wasn't funny the first time.
And I love that line.
It's so good. Line
because it perfectly encapsulates how Batman's worldview contrasts from Joker's, because I've always seen Batman, and I think this story does a good job of showing it. He had his one bad day when his parents died, and that sent him on the trajectory towards, his path, arguably towards madness. We'll get to it when we talk about the end. But the difference between Batman and Joker is their response to what happened to them. Joker's response was to go mad. Batman's response was to look at that meaninglessness, that kind of randomness and meaninglessness of the world, and refuse to give into it. Basically, it kind of goes back to that line from The Dark Knight Returns, where he's like, the only way the world makes sense is when you force it to. I probably butchered it, but that's a great line.
I think you quoted the BBS version.
Is it not verbatim?
I don't remember. That's from the comic. If it's not verbatim, it's really close.
Because he says it in the comic, and that scene quotes the comic.
Yeah.
I don't immediately remember.
I just couldn't remember if it was verbatim or if it's a little bit of a paraphrase.
Well, I also think it's inner monologue in the comic. I don't think he's literally saying it out loud.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, he doesn't say it out loud in the comic.
And I love to consider this canon with Dark Knight Returns. Just imagining that Batman and Joker being 20 years after this story. I think that works really well.
Is Barbara Gordon even in that universe?
I mean, she's not referenced, but she could be. There's no reason. Like Dick's mentioned once and never shows up. Like
never shows up.
That is not true, sir. Dick does show up.
I'm talking about that story.
That story.
Anyway,
yeah, I love that scene.
They have a pretty cool fight. It's I'm gonna sound dismissive, but it's nothing special by Batman standards. But there's more emotion behind it, so it doesn't bother me.
It's kind of like what Robert was saying earlier with the whole like, it's more grounded and not very like choreographed or romanticized. It's just like two guys just
Joker really kicks his ass.
Torgo, or Robert in the big fight towards the end, right before Batman knocks him out of the window. At least in the new coloring, it kind of looks like Joker's missing half of his jaw.
Let me look at this.
It's I think that's just supposed to be the shadow.
I think it is, but the way it's drawn is like it's just missing half of his jaw.
When he gets
it's the same here.
Is that that's the original coloring? I'm assuming.
Yeah.
To me, it looks like he's just bleeding from his mouth.
Really?
It doesn't look. Yeah.
Are you looking at the right panel?
The one that Robert's pointing out. Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't even have a bottom jaw.
No, it just looks like his lips are bleeding.
Oh, see, I don't have that. I think it looks like his lower jaw is missing.
No, I mean, I don't know. He still has a chin.
Yeah, but like this is a really good example of just like that.
Really okay, but where is the chin in that panel, Torgo? Where is it?
It's right there. Hold on, let me see if I can. It didn't show up earlier, but let me see.
Torgo, in case you didn't. Torgo, in case you didn't know, the Joker has red lips.
No, he does. But it's dripping. It's dripping from his mouth.
What? In the next panel, it is.
What are you talking about? The next panel is him on the ground.
No, you're looking at the wrong panel. The panel before that.
Right. Which? Let me see.
The one with Batman's fist.
Oh yeah.
This is all getting cut out. This is all getting cut out.
I think that's Batman lifting up his.
And we can't cut it out. We're live.
Shirt.
Oh, you know what?
Yeah, but there's no editing.
No, I know it is. I'm just saying it looks like he's missing the bottom half of his jaw.
I mean, I guess it does. I never thought that, but anyway.
Torgo, you're looking at the wrong panel.
That was pointless.
You're pointless.
You said the one where he gets kicked out. I thought that.
I said before that.
Okay, I wasn't listening.
Well, on the next page, since we were talking about the scene with Barbara earlier, and if we buy her freezing like that and getting shot, we get a direct callback to that with the gun. And if that had I think Batman's getting shot. Like,
oh yeah, because Batman just stops.
Yeah,
he's just like, oh.
He's like, oh, I'm dead.
Like I said, like I know people love to romanticize Batman, and the Golden Age even does it too. Like he's the strongest, best fighter in the world, the best, but he's just a guy. He gets beat up a lot. He's just doing his best. Like there's,
I don't know. I think, and part of it just depends on the time era, right? Like it makes sense for a modern Batman to be like the best at martial arts. Well, okay,
Batman is really good.
Batman is the jack of all trades, master of none. Because I think in most continuities, like you still have people like Lady Shiva that are better than him. Cassandra Cain.
Cassandra Cain.
I couldn't think of her last name for saying is technically on a martial arts level better than him, but he brings it all together.
Yeah.
And most of the villains that he fights aren't like a physical threat. Well, that's why they made Bane.
Here's the thing: animated series is usually touted as like the definitive Batman, and I to an extent I agree. That's probably my favorite, but he gets knocked out in like every episode, and usually he's just really lucky that the villains never take off his mask or shoot him in the head. But he's captured and knocked out in like every episode of that show. Like I don't know if I'd call him the world's best fighter or anything in that. Like he gets beat up a lot, and I think that's fine.
No, for sure. And then this might be my favorite exchange. Batman says, "It doesn't have to end like that. I don't know what it was that bit your life out of shape. Who knows? Maybe I've been there too. Maybe I can help." And he goes on and Joker says, "No, it's too late."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love when Joker says that, like, you can kind of see his sanity come back for a split second.
Yeah,
and he's just like, "No, like, it's too late for me.
Far too late." And then he tells it.
Well, I mean, one read of the story, as we discussed earlier, is, the flashbacks we get are always from his perspective. So maybe he's making them up, maybe they're nonsense, maybe they're real, who knows? So that's one read on the comic, is like, oh, he's just crazy. Like he says, like, oh, I remember it one way one day, and then I remember it another way the next. Yeah, I prefer my past to be multiple choice anyway. And again, he's an unreliable narrator. We don't know if he's telling the truth or lying. And the flashbacks are from his point of view, so we don't know if they're real or not. So there's one read that, like, oh, he's insane. Like, he doesn't remember what really happened to him. It's all distorted and weird. Like, no, this is a very insane Joker. There's another read on this story, and my preferred take on the Joker, like in the Dark Knight, is maybe he's not technically insane. Maybe he is perfectly sane. He knows what he's doing. This is just how he sees the world. Like, that's the scariest read I think you could have on, like, the Heath Ledger Jokers. Maybe he's not, like, crazy. Like, maybe that's just who he is and how he views the world, and is, like, maybe he's not technically insane, and I find that way more disturbing than he's just crazy.
That is more disturbing. And I'm trying to remember, I think they introduced that idea in a comic.
Mm-hmm.
Might be Arkham Asylum, they say that.
Maybe. I need to go back to, like, those interview tapes, but, it's like they just put him in Arkham, because where else are you going to put a guy like that?
Not the game. I mean, A Serious House on Serious Earth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, then Joker tells this big joke at the end, the flashlight. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it goes on for like 2 pages. And then Batman laughs and grabs him, and it's left ambiguous what happened.
He puts his hand on his shoulders, and they have a good laugh.
Yep.
And then the cops come.
And the cops are like, what the hell?
Like, what are these two doing? No, I mean, all right. So we're at the. Do you guys think Batman killed Joker?
I don't.
I don't. Okay. But I wish it was a little.
Either way.
I don't know if this is fair to the book. I just wish it was less ambiguous. So that there didn't even have to be that discussion.
Well, the title is The Killing Joke, and a lot of people take it literally, like, oh, like,
yeah,
this
exactly.
is what gets him to kill him, This is the joke that gets him to kill the Joker, to finally break, and that's a read a lot of people have on, like, Batman laughing, is like, oh, now he's broken, which I don't like, and if that's what's intended, I don't think the story earns it, that, like, now, 5 seconds ago, he's pretty unfazed, he's like, I can help you, and just after this joke, he's like, ha. Like, I think it's just a little moment of, like, just stress or whatever. It's just like, this sucks.
Like the one moment of connection, that, like, the one time Joker and Batman will ever, like, connect on a human level in their whole war.
Yeah. Well, and here's the problem. This book is published as a one-shot, so I'm fine with the ambiguity, but it is really difficult for me to take this out of main continuity, which we quickly established it is, or kind of is, so if you're looking at it literally with Oracle and all the comics that follow, it's like, well, Batman didn't kill the Joker because the Joker keeps popping up. So it's hard for my brain to take that out of the equation.
Well, and I'm not even sure how much the events of this story are referenced besides Barbara getting crippled. So it could just be that.
Him element. And the Joker sharing the laugh has definitely been referenced somewhere. I just can't immediately remember the example, but that has been referenced.
All right.
Remember that laugh we shared? Oh, that was a good night.
Josh says, I do not think Batman killed the Joker. Yeah, we're all kind of in agreement with that.
Well,
I mean, I think I could go either way. I think because it's an Elseworlds, I mainly view this as an Elseworld, like, out of continuity story. So I'm fine. I'm fine with Batman killing the Joker.
The problem with that, Torgo, is I don't think we can, because this influences Batgirl too much, or Barbara Gordon.
No, that's true.
So, I mean like, obviously,
like I said before, it's just that one thing of her getting crippled. Like I don't know
Yeah,
about the rest of the events.
I don't know. Like, obviously, you know, I'm not trying to be like, no, you cannot think of it this way. So I hope nobody takes it that way. But how do you reconcile that though? Because she just gets paralyzed in two different ways. Like,
I get what Torgo's saying. Like, just looking at this as its own thing, like a Dark Knight Returns.
And I think this was intended to be its own thing from the beginning too. So,
well, yeah, but what the author intends and what actually happens are two different things. And no offense to the authors, but it doesn't really matter what you intended at the end of the day. It matters what happened.
Right.
Don't tell me it didn't happen.
Anyway,
although I will say though, I have had some asinine debates with people over the ending of this comic. It's one thing to have a different read or say, well, this is what the story is about, so of course he kills the Joker because that's my read on the story. That's fine. It's ambiguous enough. But to make up or just lie or be wrong is something that infuriates me. It's like, it's cool that you read the comic incorrectly, but I'm arguing with a crazy person. I have argued with people who have insisted that Batman is punching the Joker through his chest and killing him. And it's like, you're just wrong.
No, I mean, at that point, you're like
that's not
reinterpreting the art, like the actual art.
That's literally wrong. And I've heard people say the mud getting washed away at the end. They're like, oh, well, obviously that's the Joker's blood. And I'm like, that's not blood. That's clearly mud.
Joker has grayish brown blood.
You're driving me crazy with these stupid arguments with people online. It's like, again, it's okay to have a different interpretation, but acknowledge when you're literally wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I will say, I've never personally heard a convincing argument for why Batman kills the Joker at the end. Like, I just don't buy it. Fair. It's not my take on it.
It's ambiguous, and I've never really known where I personally fall on it. So I really just see it either way. I see both sides.
Well, what do you guys think of the final panel? Because it's an exact match to the first panel of the book of the dripping water from the rain. My read has always been, my personal interpretation, I don't know if this is necessarily what was intended, is this whole story is about the never-ending cycle of violence and the battle between Batman and the Joker. So that's why it literally ends where it began. It's about two guys in a lunatic asylum, and it ends where it began, and their fight is not over. So that's why I don't read it as Batman killing the Joker, because it's all about, this keeps going. These are two stubborn people stuck in their ways who can't change each other. So this is just going to keep going.
Or they got really lazy and just copy pasted a panel. No, I definitely think there's something. I definitely think there's something to it, because even in a way, it's kind of a mirror. Like, it starts with the water and then goes to a landscape, and this one it starts as a landscape and goes to a water shot. And knowing Alan Moore, I'm sure there's something to it, because like he deals with that in Watchmen as well.
Watchmen, yeah.
Yeah, even though this is Brian Boland and that was Dave Gibbons, like they look very similar.
They
like,
do.
If I had no context and you told me it was the same artist, I believe you. Like, they look very similar.
I forgot who drew Watchmen for a minute. I've only read that like once, and so in my head it's always been the same person, because in my opinion they look extremely similar. Like, it's creepy.
They do have similar art styles, yeah.
Yeah, both very detailed and grounded and gritty.
I think I might prefer Brian Boland's art, actually. But I do like Dave Gibbons a lot.
I love both.
I Boland, at least in the Killing Joke reprint, which may not be fair since it's newer, the recolor is cleaner in a way that I like. But I'd also have to reread Watchmen, which I do want to do. But anyway,
and the coloring's obviously very different.
Yeah, but anyway, we've been at this for almost 2 hours.
Oh, no. I was going to bring up one last thing.
Well, I was going to say final thoughts. So go ahead and bring up your last.
Okay. Well, this is one last discussion thing I wanted to bring up. Kind of going back to the joke, the titular killing joke about the two guys in the lunatic asylum. I've always seen it as the guy the guy with the flashlight is the Joker, and the guy that refuses to cross is Batman. I don't know which you guys see it as, or if there's any significance to it at all. Or
state your case, then I'll have a counter argument, or John or a subject can go first.
Basically, because they're both crazy, or Joker is proposing that him and Batman are both crazy, but Batman is the one that's in denial of it, so he refuses to go across the beam, and it's for a ridiculous reason, because he doesn't even realize that he's crazy. But
my read has always been the opposite, that the guy with the flashlight is Batman and the other guy is the Joker, because the guy with the flashlight wants to help the other one. It's like, hey, come with me. And the other one says, what do you think I am, crazy? You turn it off and I was halfway across. So I've always read that as, you say you're going to help me, but you're going to turn off the flashlight when I'm halfway across. You're not really going to help me. You're just saying that. So I don't think there's an incorrect read on that joke, but
I don't either.
I've always seen it as Batman and the Joker in that joke.
I used to think it was like that, but I kind of thought on this reading that Joker's whole point has been to prove to Batman that he is insane, and he just doesn't realize it. So I see Batman kind of fitting that role of the guy that's like, no, you're just going to turn it off when I'm halfway across. Because, like, in that joke, he kind of comes off as a guy who does not realize that he's insane. So it's kind of like, it's kind of parallel to that. That's how I read it.
Yeah. Well, who's right? Let us know in the comments.
Let us know.
You can't have multiple interpretations here. There has to be a right and a wrong.
I have never thought about it that way, so I have no argument either way. But Robert, do you have any final thoughts about the Killing Joke?
It's really good. It's like my favorite Joker dialogue in
it's
any
very
story.
Good.
It's very simple, very short. You can read this in like a half hour or less. It's worth reading. It is a quintessential Batman story, and I love it.
Would you recommend it?
Yes. Well, depends on who I'm recommending it to. It's a very adult, dark story. This shouldn't be any kid's first comic.
What do you mean? I'm gonna go around handing this to 6-year-olds.
And it's an 8-year-old.
Anyway, so Robert, you recommend it. Torgo, do you recommend it?
Absolutely. If you claim to be a Batman fan and you haven't read this, what the hell?
What are you doing?
Read it.
Tim Burton's
read it right now. Tim Burton's read
Tim Burton looked at the pictures. Anyway, I would also recommend it. This is the best reading I've had of this book ever. Reading it for the review. I read it listening to the 89 score, and it works weirdly enough.
Perfect.
Although Austin suggested reading it with the Batman score, and I'd really be curious to see how that turns out. But I think I don't want to think. I don't know if I want to think about this for a long time after spending 2 hours talking about it. So we have a comic in mind for the next review, but we hadn't decided. Do you guys want to do another comic review, or do you want to do another movie review in 2 weeks?
You mean a commentary?
Yes, that's the word.
I'd rather do a commentary in 2 weeks, but what do you think?
I'm fine with doing either. I think maybe we should do and I think the one on the docket is The Dark Knight Returns. I think we should do that just because we don't want to get further from when we reviewed the comic.
Okay, so then here's what I will officially announce, because these are the two things that we want to do. In 2 weeks from now, we will do The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2, or the Deluxe Edition, however the fuck you own it. And then after that, in 2 weeks from that, we will do Batgirl Year 1. And then hopefully by then, we will have made some progress in reading Nightfall on our own, and we can look into doing that, because that'll be a whole month from now. Looking at you, Torgo. No.
I'll read it.
No, if we haven't finished that, then we'll figure something out. But that is what our general schedule over here looks like for the next month. Torgo said that he wants to do some Arkham City Sunday, so we will be doing that.
Yeah, I got no Easter plans.
Fuck Easter.
Hey, I won't let that slide.
I said what I said. Holidays suck. Anyway, thank you guys all for hanging out. This turned into a way more massive thing than I intended it to be. It's all Robert's fault. No. Oh, I'm not cutting this down. I just do that for our game streams. These have much less like breaks and stuff that need to be edited out. Yeah. But anyway, we will see you guys in Sunday and then 2 weeks from today. And then as always, you can check us out on Haven of Horror this coming week for From Beyond. And Robert and I doing The Last of Us. Have a great night.